On migration. It is entitled Migration, the Global Governance Challenge of Our Time. And I don't think that that is an exaggeration. Within the last few days, US President Donald Trump has told the UN it is time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. Your countries are going to hell. And yet, whether Donald Trump likes it or not, we are living in an era of mass displacement. The UN currently estimates that more than 120 million people worldwide have been forced from their homes. While it's low and middle income countries that host the vast majority of those people, irregular migration into Europe and into the United States has disrupted our politics. It has fueled the populist right, and it is placing a strain on our democracies. So the challenge for the centre-left is to find a way to manage this scale of displacement that takes into account the concerns of existing populations in our countries, but which also seeks to maximise the contributions that migrants can bring and remains true to our socially democratic values. We've got a brilliant panel here. I think you guys have already been introduced. So I won't go through that again, though I would just like to add a special thanks to Lasse Ryberg from Denmark, who has stood in at the last moment. As many of you may be aware, the Danish delegation, much of it has not been able to arrive due to what we can only assume is Russian aggression in closing Copenhagen airport at the moment. So big thanks to Lasse for standing in. And I will come to Lasse first. At the Danish general election in 2022, the governing Social Democrats achieved their best result in 20 years, while the hard-right Danish People's Party gained 3% of the vote. Absolutely. A rare success for the centre-left over the hard-right at a time when migration is such a prominent issue in our politics. Would you be able to just give us an overview of the approach that the Danish government has taken with regard to migration, both in terms of the policy and in terms of the narrative that you were trying to get across to voters?
Yeah, I will certainly try to do that and maintain the focus on an overview and not a historical run-through. But it's important to know the political history in Denmark in terms of immigration to understand why we are at the point we are now. I mean, we all concur that we live in troubling times with war, instability, and we are seeing right-wing party taking power in numerous countries around the world. So therefore, it has been very important to us to be in sync with our population. There are no easy solutions. Often in our progressive family, we have this mantra saying, when they go low, we go high. We would say when they go low, we need to go relevant. This is a question about relevance without losing your fundamental ideological aspects. Already 30 or 40 years ago, we were warned as a party by a lot of our a lot of our local mayors. They were saying they experienced that immigration was getting out of hand. It created a lack of social coherency, and the balances were simply off. We struggled with that debate, those policies, for decades internally in our party. In 2001, we lost power. We lost the election primarily due to immigration issues and issues of crime. So all until we had some years in government during Helle Thorning-Schmidt, but it was not such a great success in those terms. In 2018, we had a new leader, Mette Frederiksen, and she set out a new course, a new comprehensive policy in terms of immigration and integration in our country. And our analysis was that we needed to pivot on these subjects in order to get permission from a lot of the voters we have lost during all of those years we were out of government. We had a lot of policy propositions that were a good thing for them in terms of pension age, early retirement, expanding welfare, but they simply weren't listening to us because of our earlier positions on immigration and integration. And one other thing, and that's hard to choose, but the aspect of being authentic on this subject cannot be understated. Mrs. Frederiksen, she usually says that voters can spot if you are talking about a firm stance on immigration while you're crossing your fingers on your back. They can sniff it out, so you actually have to mean it, and that's a harder thing to. You cannot choose that. You must own it in your heart. Yeah. All right. But in our 2018 pivoting policy, we had clear goals. We need secure borders. We need to protect our young girls in Denmark from social control within their families. We need to increase and secure social coherency in public areas of public social housing. We need to protect the wages set up in collective bargaining. We had an ambition of bringing down or contributing at least to bring down the numbers of casualty in the Mediterranean, all the refugees and the migrants crossing the Mediterranean. And we are a small country, 6 million inhabitants with high benefits. And when you arrive in Denmark legally, as a migrant, as a refugee, you instantly get benefits. So of course we also need to maintain some kind of balance in terms of numbers. So with focus on responsibility and rights, we set a new course. Just to point out some of the actual policies, we raised the legal marrying age for non-citizens. We are seeking to establish centers for refugees in countries outside the EU. We've pushed for more deportations when people are convicted for violent crimes. And we are actually relocating people, both immigrants and Danes, from the most burdened social public housing areas in order to gain social coherency, in order to re-establish those balances. And as said before, the Danish People's Party, they were at 22% in 10 years ago, and now they came out with 3.5% the last election. And the last thing I would like to say in this round is that we have both enacted hard policies, firm policies, restriction policies, but we are also pursuing a lot of the things that we usually stamp being progressive. We are at 7.7% in 0.7% in foreign aid. We are respecting and upholding international treaties. We are pushing for further deals with bordering countries. We are offering housing and benefits for those who are legally in our country, and we are enacting more anti-racism and anti-discriminatory legislation. So we are quite resolute in our firm policies, but we are also doing a lot of the things that we usually call progressives. But of course, or not of course, we are maybe communicating the firm stances more than all the traditional progressive things in order to maintain this permission with the voters to talk about them, to talk to them about a lot of the other things we want to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, please.
So a year after the Danish elections, the Spanish Social Democrats PSOE also won re-election with an increased share of the vote, and the hard-right party Vox losing both vote share and seats. And in case we were tempted to think that there might just be one simple, straightforward winning formula for centre-left parties on migration, PSOE approached the issue quite differently. So, Diego, could you take us through the Spanish government's approach to migration?
Yes. So, at the Spanish government, we know that it's important to connect with citizens' beliefs, but not when that makes you deploy the wrong policies. Our migration strategy is based on 4 principles. The first principle is that we have a moral and legal duty towards migrants because they're human beings, regular or irregular. This sounds basic, but nowadays, unfortunately, we keep saying it. they're human beings. The second principle is that you cannot stop migration. Maybe in the short term, if you invest a lot of resources, but never in the long term, because our forests, our deserts, our oceans are too big. And the need of those fleeing from violence or poverty is too high. So you will never stop it. That's why we believe that every single pound you invest in trying to stop migrants, you're wasting it. You should devote that money to canalize, to channel migration properly. The third principle, maybe one of the most important ones, is that all those studies published in the 60s and the 70s about the world going overcrowded were completely rubbish. This idea that by mid-century there will be too much people in the world so we won't have a space or water for them are completely flawed. The reality is that most countries, in Europe certainly, are underpopulated and that they're going to lose millions of inhabitants in the coming decades because of demographic aging. And the reality as well, and this can be proof, is that even nowadays, one of the main engines of growth for our economic models is demographic growth. If you look at Europe over the past decade alone, was more than 25% of our economic growth was driven by demographic growth. So what we believe, and AI is not going to change that, by the way. So what we believe is that in 10, 20, 30 years from now, we will look backwards and we will see two kinds of developed countries. Those who remain close, they will go stagnant. They will struggle to, with deficit and debt. They will struggle to keep their welfare state alive, and life for everybody will be worse. And those who remain open, they will remain growing economies, and therefore they will be able to keep their welfare states alive. And there's the fourth principle or idea, which is that we are seeing a lot of people buying the framework of the far right when they forget or ignore the fact that most of the problems that we tend to link to migration are not caused by migration, are not caused by the nationality, the religion, or the color skin of the people, are caused by poverty, inequality, lack of prospects, lack of education. So where you need to solve those problems is not to follow the far-right agenda and say we have too many migrants here. What you have to do is to invest in public services, in welfare state, because in housing, that's how you're going to really solve the problems for all the migrants and for your local citizens. This is the way we see it. And by the way, it's working. It is working.
Thank you for that. Dan Restrepo, I'd like to turn now to talk about some of the countries that are really dealing with the sharp end of mass displacement of people. Around 8 million Venezuelans have left their country over the last decade, and around 3 million of those are currently in Colombia alone. So these are huge numbers. For context, around 6 million people have fled from Syria, with about 1 million people from Syria across the whole of Europe. So, Dan Restrepo, how did countries like Colombia deal with this mass displacement without losing political consent?
And I think it's important to look at Colombia's experience and Latin America's experience. As I know, when we look at migration in the Americas from a U.S. perspective, we spend a great deal of time focused on the 15 to 20% of the migration that actually gets to the United States. And we spend far less time understanding how a region has dealt with the other 80 to 85%. And as you rightly note, Colombia is today, so a country of 40 million people has received 3 million Venezuelans, and the other 5 million that have left Venezuela in the last decade at least passed through, almost all of them passed through Colombia. So migration is very much a day-to-day reality in countries in the global south. And I think to look at what Colombia has done, and this is obviously not my story to tell, and it, quite frankly, from a political perspective, would have been more compelling, I think, from the person who was supposed to be in this seat. who is the former mayor of Barranquilla, Colombia, Jaime Pumarejo, who unfortunately couldn't join us at the last moment. And Jaime's story, from a political perspective, is a very interesting one. So during his time as mayor of Barranquilla, which is the largest Colombian city closest to the Venezuelan border, his city's population grew by 10% in a 5-year period of time, all fueled by migration. And at the end of Jaime's term in office, he left office as the most popular mayor in Colombia. We normally think that that kind of disruption, that kind of influx, it would be political death to whomever was there to have to manage it. But it wasn't for a guy like Jaime, and it wasn't for Claudia Lopez in Bogotá and other mayors. And the reason it wasn't, I think, is twofold. Is they understood, both at a national level and a local level, the importance of providing legal authorization for folks to work. So the movement from being a fiscal and social burden, migrants quickly became fiscal contributors. Colombia's working population today is somewhere between 3 and 4 years younger than it was a decade ago in a country that was aging naturally. So there's a huge fiscal benefit that has come to the reduced age in the workforce driven by migration. And they allowed that to be tapped into by providing legal status. And the other is what I call a host community. They took a host community approach to managing migration. Understanding that the social and fiscal burden falls on local communities where migrants arrive. And they decided to support the communities rather than just or even principally the migrants who were arriving. So you weren't fueling social tension by providing, quote unquote, special benefits to the new residents of Barranquilla or Bogotá, but rather to the communities that were becoming their new homes. And obviously, if you're supporting those communities, you are also supporting their new residents. But doing that together, I think, allowed kind of a social permission structure to take hold, and allowed folks, again, to become new residents of those communities, and to become contributors to those communities in a way that is, again, it's not perfect. Xenophobia is present in Colombia and elsewhere in the Americas, but has been tempered in a moment, in a decade, where you have seen unprecedented mobility in the Americas, because again, 25 to 30% of global mobility is taking place in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is home to only 8% of the world's population.
Thank you. I think that's so interesting, talking about contribution and support for communities as key to kind of buying political consent for really those absolutely extraordinary number of migrants that Latin America is hosting at the moment. So, Frank Sherry.
Hello.
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 Immigration has been cited as one of the major reasons behind Donald Trump's victory in the presidential election. And yet it's a very widely underappreciated fact that under the Biden-Harris administration, encounters with migrants at the US-Mexico border fell from a peak of 250,000 per month in December 2023 down to 30,000 a month by the time that Biden left office. You worked on the Harris campaign. Can you take us through that sort of extraordinary fact that, you know, firstly, how did the administration achieve those numbers and yet not get political credit for it, Frank? I'm not blaming you, honestly.
Everybody want to watch heartbreak happen as we speak. The President Biden got the politics and policy of immigration wrong for 3.5 years. And by the time the Biden administration got it right, not so much because of him, but because of policy officials at the senior level who got together and cracked the code. So what they did is they combined meaningful international cooperation from Mexico and other countries in the Americas. Dan had a big role in that. They also made it very hard for people to cross the border illegally, to apply for asylum so that they weren't just let into the country and put into 7-year backlogs, meaning they were never going to be removed. And they expanded legal pathways so that people could apply for refugee and humanitarian visas. The combination undermined the business model of the smugglers. It made much more sense for a Venezuelan to apply for a humanitarian visa, fly in an airplane into America, be met by a sponsor, and have work permission, than to pay $10,000 to go to the border, be turned away, and be unable to get into the United States under law for years. So the incentive structure shifted. And so I give credit to the White House officials who got it right. I don't think President Biden actually kind of got this issue instinctually, and it's a big problem. But I think we can learn something from it. Look, I've worked on this issue for 40 years in a variety of capacities, now as a think tanker, which is new to me. I think it means I can say whatever the hell I want. But the things that work, at least in an American context, are that you've got to take the issue seriously because the voters take the issue seriously. It's not just a right-wing issue. It's an issue for it was the number 2 issue in the election. And so when President Biden didn't want to talk about it because his advisors said it'll increase the salience of the issue, it's a Republican issue, stay away from it, that ceded the narrative turf to Trump and the Republicans to define the issue. It was the Biden border crisis. It was the Democrats are the party of open borders. And with no countervailing contesting narrative, that took hold among many voters. And while inflation and cost of living was the main issue in the election, the late-breaking voters, the swing voters who decided late, they favored Trump over Harris on immigration and border security by 42 points. So we end up with an authoritarian using an immigration crackdown as the edge of the spear in his authoritarian project, rather than having a sensible policy that comports with where most Americans are. So here are the 3 things that I think for America to get for the center left to get immigration right, you've got to take the issue seriously. That's not to say make it the only issue, but don't pretend it's not an issue. I think we'll see an example of the next speaker showing that in the UK they're taking it seriously. They're leaning in. Right? Number 2, you've got to solve the problem. All the messaging in the world doesn't work if you don't have a serious solution. And again, credit to the folks who brought solutions to bear in year 4 of the Biden administration, but it was too late to make an electoral difference. The majority of Americans want a balanced policy. This is what the contours of the debate are often a mobilized right slinging simplistic slogans to mobilize fear and hate, and dare I say, a shouty left advocating for maximalist demands that make the debate seem in the public mind as it's all or nothing. If it's a debate between all or nothing, nothing is going to win.
Every time.
If it's a debate between nothing, fear and hate, simplistic solutions, scapegoating and xenophobia, and a balanced approach that says we're going to be a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws, we're going to make illegal immigration work and work to sharply reduce illegal immigration, that's where the majority of people are. Americans aren't anti-immigrant, they're anti-chaos. And the border chaos drove Trump's electoral advantage in a way that really hurt Kamala Harris's campaign. So, I learned so much yesterday by talking in some of our small group work with the Danes and the Spanish and the Swedes and the Australians. Every country has a different authentic story. But your authentic story has to be the basis for how you talk about this. In America, we're not an open borders country. We're a country that has long celebrated legal immigration and tried to deter illegal immigration. And when we tell that story of we're a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws, that's not some sort of tawdry trade-off. That is a statement of values. In fact, the best way to be either is to be both. They work together. Because when we have more control at our borders, we have more generosity for expanded legal pathways. So I think that the center-left has to find its voice on this in a way that is not intimidated by the left, not cowed by the right, and it is not aping either narrative. It's a center-left narrative that says we can solve this problem in a way, we can manage this problem in a way that reflects our values and serves our interests.
Thank you, Frank. We've just got a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to very quickly ask Diego and Lasse. I mean, centre-left parties tend to struggle with immigration because they're often trying to hold together a coalition of older working-class voters with socially conservative views and often younger, more educated voters with socially liberal views. So if just like 1 minute on how you've held that coalition together with the immigration policy that you have in Spain.
You know, I totally get your points about this is an issue, so don't try to ignore it. But at the same time, I think one of the mistakes we are making in many places is that we are buying the idea that this is the only topic. So we are limited in the whole debate on this, and this one of the effects that it has is it makes you forget how aligned you are in other issues with your allies, right? So I guess one of the ideas is keeping a coalition together is not easy, but we've been the first coalition government in the history of Spain, actually. And I guess the golden rule is start making friends among the ranks of the other parties, and then never lose focus of the things that unite you, and don't focus only on the things that divide you. And then, you know, in our case, as we were talking before, we have the luck that the opposition makes things much easier many days. So.
Thank you, Diego. And Lasse, very quickly.
Very quickly, I don't know. We are not one of those parties or governments who feel that this is the only issue. We've tried to and been able to mostly to neutralize this subject. The vast majority of the Danish voters are behind us, and there's a big majority in Parliament who supports these policies. So when we were a one-party government from 19 to 22, relying on the left on all other issues, they accepted that fact, and so they didn't overthrow the government due to their disagreement on those policies. And now we are in a coalition government with parties who also agree with this point. So I would say immigration is not only a financial thing. A major part of a vast part of our fiscal surplus comes from migrant workers from Eastern European countries. We welcome them, they behave, they work, they respect the law of the land. There's no problem in saying that, and we also do that. But if you are classical progressive and you tend to focus too much on the fiscal things, the redistribution, the financial thing, but what about minimum wage? What about social coherency? You need to attend to all those factors if you don't want to lose the majority of the voters.
Thank you. So I think my conclusion is that centre-left parties do not have to be powerless in the face of this issue. We've got different political situations in different countries, and the answers will be different in all of those countries. But I think you made an excellent point right at the beginning that whatever the solution, the government needs to be authentic. They need to make clear choices that are in line with the values that they feel authentically comfortable with advocating. And I think, you know, if they do that, they can both shape conditions on the ground and be able to influence the political narrative and be able to give an answer to Donald Trump's challenge. So I'd just like to thank our excellent panel, and can we have a round of applause, please?
Thank you so much to our morning panellists. They've been really, really insightful. Well, we're now going to take a very quick reset, and we'll be back in a few minutes. So make the most of this time. Thank you.